Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to give you a quick message on today's video. I have a family obligation that I need to attend today, so I won't be able to stream at 11 o'clock live. But I have prepared a previous video that I did, which apparently was a relatively popular video, and I'm going to rerun that in place of today's show. And this is the God's Debris video that I did at the very beginning. It was well received apparently, and I thought that I kind of an experiment to see if rerunning this would get the same kind of hits that I received on the first attempt. So now, and that's not really a big concern. My main thing is I know that what I covered in that video was pretty relevant and useful, and it felt good when I did it, and I think it'll probably still resonate. So I hope you will forgive me for not being able to attend today. It's just one of those things that I have to do. Now, another point that I want to make on this, and this is a really important one. I have a wonderful relationship with my wife, and I'd like to keep it that way. Now, one of the key things that Scott Adams said, or actually Scott Adams' ex-wife said at the funeral, was that when Scott decided to start doing a live stream, he kind of had come back from having some medical issues that gave him his voice thing, that gave him the opportunity to suddenly do something that he could use his voice with. And he decided that because he couldn't really have the purpose family life that he was looking for in his life, he wasn't getting the meaning out of it that he wanted. He decided to dedicate his life to the world and give himself to that. And that essentially may be part of what caused his marriage to fall apart. Now, I don't know that. I'm speculating, so I'm not trying to put any kind of connotation on it. But I heard that when she was talking at the funeral, and it was a big deal to me because I really love my wife, and my wife really loves me, and I don't want to miss obligations or just family enjoyment, getting together with people, to have this maniacal focus on a stream that is live where I have to always be at the desk at a specific time. So what I can do, though, is I can prepare things for you and still give us the live stream feeling, because the chat is open. You'll be able to communicate with other people who are watching this right now if you want to. And it'll also air at the same time. And then later I may, I'm putting a lot of my videos together now as condensed so that they're a little bit better in terms of getting to the point and providing the value that I really want to provide with the videos that I do. So anyways, here's the thing. Since I can't be here, I'm going to do the simultaneous or the second sip. And here's the best part. It's not necessarily simultaneous. It's the second sip. So if you're on your second cup of coffee and you're just chilling out, this is a great time to do that. So let's go ahead and jump in. All you need is a pen or a mouse or a tablet, a computer, a coffee cup, a computer brain, and a coffee cup, and fill them with your favorite thoughts. I like positive ones. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the creative thought of the day, the saucer full of secrets, and the second sip. It happens now. Go. Okay. Now that we've shared that, and I did take a sip, I'm with you. I'm just not, unfortunately, here at the exact same time. But let's get into the show. Enjoy. I truly hope this is actually a very useful video for you and that you would enjoy seeing it again. Cheers. Talk to you soon. Hello, folks. Those of you who are joining me, if you are interested, this is kind of a supplemental stream to my weekend Coffee with Scott Adams fan streams. There are a lot of people trying to do something right now related to, just kind of following up with what Scott did, obviously with his passing. It's motivated a lot of people to jump out there and do something and be part of what's going on. So I've actually decided to put together a consistent stream, but I don't really want to compete with the other folks doing the Coffee with Scott Adams School. And I don't necessarily plan to do the simultaneous sip because you already have done that if you are attending that other stream. But I am taking a sip. That said, I put together some content, each day that has passed between looking at what I'm seeing on X and looking at, various things going on YouTube, and also thinking about things that I've experienced in my life that transformed my life and how I see other people in my life, folks in my family or folks outside as friends that go through these periods of time where they're trying to figure out how to build their life, grow their, capabilities, or grow their, get the direction of their life going in the direction they want. I put together some content that I thought I'd go through here. It's kind of loosely based on some of the things that were introduced in Scott's book, God's Debris. And it's really about decision making. And if I'm looking down, by the way, it's because that's where my notes are. But the decision making, predicting probabilities, and creating luck. And I did post an article kind of just summarizing most of what I'm going to be talking about here in the next few minutes on X as well as on Locals. So if you're on either one of those platforms, you can see the summary of where I'm going to be heading with this. At some point in the future, maybe I'll or edit this video and put a B-roll in all of the little pieces as I go through this and see how it comes out. But in the short run, this is just a live stream, and I'm going to be talking, like I said, about God's debris. And the idea with this is that if you want to take advantage of some of the things in your life, opportunities in your future, there's kind of a mindset and how you can think about this. And when Scott wrote the book God's Debris, at one point there's a chapter in there called God's Debris, and it's the premise of the book. The idea being that God, in whatever form he was or it was prior to existence starting, was that in order for us to be what we are, the universe had to be created. So call that the Big Bang if you're not religious, and obviously God creating the earth, heavens and earth and whatnot if you're more spiritual. But the idea being that whatever was or is God prior to that moment was all potential. And the idea of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, from the perspective of how is that possible in a non-purely religious spiritual perspective, is the idea that perhaps the particles that made up whatever existed before the universe became what it is was all coalesced into one being, one existence. Then there's and I'm going to be going through this a little bit more, there's an interesting premise that Scott brought to our attention just a few days before he died. And it was actually kind of a profound thought. He said, this may be like, this idea may blow your mind. And the idea is this. Today, we're all looking at our world through the lens of AI, right? And we have people building AIs with the intention of creating something called artificial general intelligence. And AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is supposed to be equivalent to us. We, as human beings, at some point, the ability to think like us, act like us, take actions. And when you come to what Elon is doing with Optimus, becoming the physical, real world embodiment of that AI in a way that interacts with the world in real time. When you think about us as beings, there's many of you may have heard Scott talk about simulation theory. If you're not somebody who follows Scott Adams, the idea with simulation theory is that if we are actually creating simulations and can enter a world of a simulation, think of it as a video game, whatever you want to call it, that simulation proves that there is a high likelihood that we are a simulation. Our entire universe is a simulation. So in the act of creating the universe, whatever you want to call God, is the the spark behind that simulation becoming expanded and fully fledged such that we have this universe we live in. As a result, the universe is a subjective reality based on your observation of that universe. And some might even argue that God is living through us, each and every one of us. Matter of fact, Robert Heinlein had written a book called Stranger in a Strange Land. And one of the concepts that he postulated there, the belief system of the main character was the idea that I am God, thou art God, all that is God, right? All the material, all of the God's debris, all of that is God, everything, all of it. And so that makes us a part of God, and God lives through us, and we, are the existence of something that permeates all reality, lives through us, is part of us. And this goes right down to what is the Force in Star Wars, right? So it's this energy that permeates everything, and so on. You probably have your own take on all of this, but the idea is that, and this is the premise that Scott gave us in one of his last solo live streams, was what if we are simulations just the same way that we are creating AI to become an artificially general intelligent, and ultimately at some point possibly a super intelligent being that has far more reality of far more capabilities and abilities than we individuals have as human beings. So artificial superintelligence, as a result, would be kind of the culmination of all human knowledge plus. So AGI might be the culmination of all human knowledge brought into either an AI or into a robotic format that becomes the equivalent of us. Now, if God was actually creating us, what Scott postulated was, what if God is more primitive than us? What if we are the artificial superintelligence that God was trying to create at the beginning of creation? Meaning that, maybe the perspectives of what is or was the potential of God before becomes vastly more infinite in the expression of the universe as it is today, because every single pathway that's out there that you choose, every option that exists, comes from a potential. If you think about, there's shows like Quantum Leap, and there's a whole bunch of different shows where the idea is that the future is a whole host of possible decisions. As a matter of fact, when you think about the Marvel multiverse in the way that they've identified that, and the butterfly effect, one change in something that happens, why we don't believe time travel, going back in time, is a good idea. It's because that one change could wipe out an entire future existence. And in reality, if you think about it, if all of the possible futures that could happen, your decision today to do one thing or another, you have a pathway that could lead you one way or another, that you become two totally distinct and different people because of a choice. Every single day we make these kind of choices. And it's very possible that in order to expand the possibilities, then we, as God's debris, are the successor to a previous existence that potentially couldn't reach the capabilities that we are reaching right now. In the same manner that AGI, is artificial general intelligence, is equivalent to all that we could be. Artificial superintelligence is where potentially it goes beyond us. It could go into something that is bigger and more intelligent and more capable than all of humanity combined, right? And that's the potential. That's the possibility. And we're reaching the upper limit of how much information goes into AGI today, because we're even now starting to have to create synthetic data in order to train the models for what is the next iteration of GPTs that are out there. So it's just a very profound thought that Scott left us with right before he passed. So when I think about all of that, and I think about, that actually explains how God can be omnipotent and omniscient, because all of the possible potentials in the futures are that potential. It's all of the possibilities, all of the probabilities that exist in the world, in the universe. And because they're probabilities, until a choice is made, they are all that could possibly be. But once we actually make a choice, we pick a path, we set the path in the direction of something that is determined by the decisions that we've made. Our life becomes what is the culmination of all of the decisions that we've made. So in order to think about that, how is it that we might impact our reality in a way that's more positive? And ultimately, what that comes down to is decision making. And decision making is made up of a number of different things. It's different tasks and different elements. One of the things that came up on this morning's Coffee with Scott Adams School discussion was the idea of what Scott said, which is nothing happens until you truly make a decision. And a good example of that is you have your resolution at the beginning of the year, right? January 1st resolutions. And those are not decisions. Those are intentions, right? We have this intention to go in the direction of a certain thing, lose weight, be healthy, do something with our life, whatever it might be. It is not until you are suddenly realizing you're taking action that the decision has actually been made. And when you decide to make that decision, the decision becomes your reality because of the picture you have in your head, the affirmations, as Scott would say, that describe the future reality. One of the things about how this works, visualization is how you put in your head what you want that future to look like. And you actually are basically describing the path of who you want to become, what you want to do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. But recognizing the pattern of what you were to be and to get to where you are, that pattern recognition going backward, it describes a person, right? And it describes a thing you've chosen to be. When you decide and truly decide to do something different in the future, to diverge from the path that you're on, if you want to make a divergence and you want to actually change and get onto a path that you specifically want to have, you have to picture something different than what you were, because that person that was behind you, that is your past, is described in the images that you had built into your brain as a result of either impressions people had when they were young or when you were young that they gave you. This is what you should be. This is how you should be. This is what you should do. Those expectations that were put on you at a young age built you into who you are up to this moment. But when you are now able to think back and also visualize your future and start setting some things in place like affirmations on this is where I'm going, this is what it will be, you then are able to describe in your head a different pattern that may not be the past. And there's, Tony Robbins sometimes says, the future does not have to equal the past. And I love that statement. But I will also tell you when it comes to things like contract performance, one of the things that I've done over the years is write proposals and do contract performance situations where, a customer who's buying something wants to know, is this something that you will be able to carry out? So if you built something in the past, they look at your past performance to predict your future delivery, because that's all they can go on. They can't know your intentions. They can't really get in your head and figure out what you're visualizing. So they look at your past performance to predict where you're going. And what Tony Robbins postulated in his statement was, you do not have to choose to be that person in the past. You could be somebody different. And that's actually what Scott and Jordan Peterson, for example, both stated when they talk about visualizing something for the future, trying to determine how to self-author your future and make it something different, something better than what it was. So when you get to that point, one of the things that's really difficult in life is that 9 times out of 10, the decisions that you have to deal with are thrust upon you. You seldom, there was a book years ago called uh, Who Moved My Cheese or Don't Move My Cheese or something like that. The idea is that here we are, all rats in a maze running around. And when you eventually train the rat to find the cheese over and over again, going through the maze, the rat will go, the time it takes the rat to get to the cheese goes down and goes down. It's called productivity, right? We become more and more productive the more often we navigate the maze and find the cheese. And so when you spend your life looking at your pattern of what you're going to do every single day, you get up, you go to work, you do your job, and you get your paycheck, right? There's your cheese. So all of these aspects of coming to where you are is you getting through that maze to go find the piece of cheese. And when somebody comes along and just picks up that cheese, like you get laid off, somebody cuts the company you're working for and you no longer have a job, or you decide to retire and suddenly you're no longer on that treadmill or you're no longer running that maze to find the piece of cheese, you have to find out where you're putting your own piece of cheese. You have to make that decision. So because decisions come upon us often without much warning, and because sometimes we make these decisions in a way that you have no choice, or it seems like you have no choice, it's really a good idea to figure out how to get those decision making capabilities such that you can make snap decisions and make the right decision over and over again. One of the things, if you have time to sit back, like you plan your January resolution for months ahead of time. And what am I going to do? I'm going to set up my diet. I'm going to empty my fridge of bad stuff. I'm going to put only good stuff in there, and I'm going to go to the gym and do all of the things. Put on my clothes, as Scott would say, so that I'm halfway there every single time. Those are you taking the time to plan, so that at the moment when you get out of bed and you say, "Oh, I just don't feel like it today," but you put your gym clothes on as a ritual every single day, and it kind of gets you in the direction, and you just start moving until you're in the gym, and then suddenly well, I'm here. I should just, the heck with it. I could drive home and go back to bed, or I could just get my butt in the gym and actually make it happen. So that decision, that moment of deciding, if we put these processes in place for decision making ahead of time, it's not about knowing the future. It's not about following a plan. It's about having the ability to make a snap decision, like, do I roll over, go back to sleep, or get my butt up and go to the gym? That snap decision, you have the ability to force yourself to make the right decision instead of rolling over. And give you an example. If you have time to plan, you can decide that I'm either going to jump off a cliff or I'm going to jump off a diving board into a pool. Maybe you can figure out a safe way to jump off a cliff. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to figure that out, and they might follow you and go over the edge just like a lemming. Or you can say, no, I'm going to learn how to become a diver. I'm going to learn how to swim, and I'm going to get into being a diver and jump off the diving board into the pool, and I'll do it a certain way in order to make sure I get the positive outcome that I'm looking for. But getting those decisions made and making them accurately and consistently is a difficult thing. So in order to do that, we want to be able to figure out a little bit on how to predict the future. Now, this is where Scott and Jordan Peterson both talked about doing things like self-authoring, where basically you kind of describe your world, you set the visualization, you use the affirmations, so that when you get to the point where and you set up and create the patterns and systems that you use to move forward through life. Those decision-making capabilities and the ability to make sure that you understand how to make the right decisions are all something you can stage. They're things that you can plan for. It doesn't mean you made the decision before. What it means is that you set up the conditions so that when the decision comes upon you, you have the ability to choose A or B in the right, knowing that I'm always going to go B or A, B, C, I'm going to pick C, whatever it is. You already have a plan, and you have a process and a ritual every single day that gets you down the right path. and you don't worry about whether or not you have the maze to run through to get the cheese. You just simply have a plan to go get some cheese. And you might have to use a different maze each time. And you could use a process like I'm going to take a right at every single turn on the first pass. And if I get lucky, I find the cheese right away. If I don't, then I start doing, okay, I'm going to do right, 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 and the last one left. You build these processes and patterns and decision-making techniques that help you get to the end goal, which is finding that cheese and not being, bereft at the end of the day. So the only way to do that, though, is to visualize the future and understand a little bit about where that future could go, understanding the potentials for that future. So a couple of things that I came across over the past couple of months when I was thinking and just, absorbing things like I do. I'm into constantly feeding my brain good things so that I can improve myself. And I came across some videos by Chase Hughes over on YouTube, and brilliant guy, by the way. One of the things that I thought was interesting is he was talking about how to, I'm going to step away from Chase for 1 second and talk about Colonel John Boyd. Now, John Boyd is the person who helped us develop the F-15 back in the 70s. He's also one of the strategists that helped us win the original Desert Storm, that decisive battle that we had. He actually helped to lay out the plan for that. Now, he had created this thing called the OODA loop, which I'm going to talk about later. But in the idea of one of the statements that he made that's really relevant here is you can either be somebody or you can do something. Being somebody means you pick the persona and you go after, the titles, the station in life that you want to be in. And that's actually a very hard one for people to envision, because as a person, I'm going to use the military as an analogy here because it helps for this particular discussion. If you go into the military as a private and you want to become a general, you have to iterate your way through a whole bunch of different steps in order to get to becoming a general. You're the private. What do you do as a private? You do what you're told. Then you become a corporal or a lance corporal or a squad leader. That means you do what you're told, but you also tell a group of people underneath you what to do. It's kind of the beginnings of middle management. And you progress up that middle management until you reach a point where you're a general, through many iterations and many different changes. But you have to become a different person at each one of those stages. And it's like playing a video game. You could run around the video game on level 1 all day long. But if you don't decide to go to level 2, you just keep going around level 1. It's very unfulfilling. You find that you can't get ahead. You can't change your life. You can't grow into something else. So to be somebody is that process of iterating through the different personas that you're going to become to go from being an entry-level, first-level person all the way up to, potentially a general in the military or a CEO of a company or whatever you might choose. But then there's the do something side. And the do something is, how do I make decisions that yield me good results, right? Some of the good results might be, how do I get more money, right? How do I earn more money? How do I establish myself in a way that allows me to earn more money? What do I choose to do and how do I choose to do it so that I'm actually getting the outcome that I want, the cheese, right? Chase created this concept that you are an identity. Your construct of what you are in your head, most people, that structure stops around age 25. And, for the rest of your life, unless you make a really concerted effort to make a change, you're going to be that same person. And you could be that